preaching. It would be wasting it to not use it for as many people as possible. But that number in itself is not the thing to be pursued, but it's the glory of Christ, even as we declare his name. And Christians have to be careful with that too, because there's a tendency to kind of wonder, well, how many podcast listeners are we going to get on this episode? How many people are going to view my YouTube video or buy my book? In a sense, there's the danger right there, and that the delight becomes the danger very quickly, because we move from counting souls to counting numbers, and numbers and statistics become ends in themselves that are meaningless unless Christ is glorified in them. So it's pretty tricky. It's pretty tricky, and the more God gives an audience to a man, the more danger he puts his soul in the sense that he has to be very careful that he doesn't become the message itself and keeps the messenger in frame.
It's funny you said George Whitefield, because that was my next illustration. So get out of my head for a second.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things I would say about, and I agree with you, the delight of fame, if you will, quote unquote, is the fact that you can reach masses because God has you on that pedestal. And what a lot of preachers tend to forget is that their only fame or famous is because God has them there so that he can be glorified and that he can, get all souls are saved by him alone. So not because of Matthew Everhard's fame that 10,000 people got saved, or Billy Graham's fame that 40,000 people got saved. It's because God is the foundation and the center of all of that. Obviously right now I don't have the voice of George Whitefield because I'm cracking. My voice is cracking a lot, so I can't preach to nobody right now. But the simple fact that we can bless and glorify God in the thing that we do right now. And I love this series, because we are just ordinary people with an extraordinary influence. And we have to find a way to use that. And the best way we can do it is praying to God and asking God, what is it that you want me to do in this time right now? And we let God do all the work, and we don't. Now, obviously, there are a lot of dangers of Christian fame. And let's kind of touch upon that a little bit. So what are some dangers of Christian fame, or fame in general?
Yeah. Well, I guess the dangers are, number one, it actually isn't a thing in terms of it's bringing us any real significance. Significance in life is based on the way that we live and for whom we live. But the number of people that know me is not really a thing. It doesn't bring any significance. And yet we pursue it as though it does. And it's kind of like, if you're thirsty, drinking gravel from the ground is not going to quench your thirst, because gravel is not a thirst-quenching substance. And so if you're longing for significance, meaning, and purpose in your life, then don't drink the gravel of fame, because that's not going to do it. That's only going to make you thirsty, and it's probably going to kill you. So there's a sense in which fame is very dangerous to the soul, because it's ultimately, the seeking of it at least is narcissistic, which means that you put yourself at the center of reality and you try to center all things around you. Now, if fame comes by way of God's grace, his sovereignty, he decides to use you in a large-scale way. And by the way, that's not for most of us. Most of us will not be used in a large-scale way. We'll be used in small-scale ways, and that's quite okay, as the whole series has gone on to say. But if he does, then yes, there's a danger that the narcissism in the soul actually gets fed, and we've certainly seen that many times in Christian history, even as we have many positive examples of men who've handled it well, like Spurgeon handled it well, Whitefield handled it well. There have been many, many examples of men who have not handled it well, and they get one taste of fame, and boom, it's like hitting that self-destruct button, that auto-eject seat in the plane, and all of a sudden, your life is spiraling out of control. because you pursued the wrong thing in the midst of a great opportunity. So the dangers are definitely everywhere when it comes to that.
Yeah. Now, I like how you said that, God will use us in a small scale way. And to be honest, man, I kind of like being used on a lesser level, on a small scale level. And here's why. I got a few people that I talk to on a regular that I am constantly sharing my faith with. My buddy Justin Dewey, I think it was about last year, contacted me and literally said, "Hey, I know you're a religious guy. I got this question." And Justin and I have been friends since high school, so it was nothing to catch up with him and, see how he's doing. And then also he got married, so I got a chance to do his wedding pictures. But we started talking about faith and Christ and all the glories of Christ and what Christ has done for us. And lo and behold, this conversation is still going on today, a year later.
Huh.
And I love the fact that he has us in this small bubble, if you will. But I get to intimately share the love of Christ with my friend Justin. And I get to work with him one-on-one. And I don't have the distraction of fame. I don't have the distraction of a large crowd. I don't have the worries of a large congregation, if you will. Not that I'm saying that, we shouldn't worry about those things. But I'm intimately working with a person one-on-one. And that Bible verse that backs it up that says if I can preach, well, it's not in the Bible, but I'm going to say if I can preach to one and God's glory is shown and revealed through that person, then I'm going to keep preaching to one person at a time. If that's my capacity, then that's what I want to do. I'm not seeking fame. This podcast isn't seeking fame. Again, this is just an extraordinary influence that little old extraordinary Christians like you and I are just doing to display the love of Christ and other things for that matter. Now, my next question, Matt, you kind of wrote this in the last chapter, and I'm going to read it. It says, "Isn't there something glorious about simply being obedient like Ananias?" And then it says, "Trying and failing like Epaphroditus." Why did you put that little phrase in there? That's unique.
Well, because trying and failing is a good thing. We should be trying, I suppose, to do something with our lives, trying to influence somebody, trying to help somebody, trying to care for somebody. I mean, every single one of us, we've been put in the path of other people in our lives, and it may be a small number of other people, but those people in our lives are important, and they're important to the Lord, and they're important to us. And so, I'd rather try and fail than do nothing with my life. I've known a lot of good people, good Christians who've tried to do something and it didn't work out. Whether they tried to plant a church and it didn't take, or whether they tried to do a Bible study and it sputtered out, or whether they tried to do a ministry and nobody came. And there's a way in which we could look at those things and say, "Oh gosh, what a failure here! Look at this guy. He
Right.
tried to do a podcast and nobody listened, or whatever it is, or write a book and nobody bought it." But that's not in itself failure, because God, I think, honors those attempts to glorify His name, even if He chooses not to magnify that ministry. So I would personally, just speaking for myself here, I'd rather try 10 things and fail at 9 than to try nothing and live my life, kind of just floating around.
Yeah.
Like a cork on the sea, bouncing around, doing nothing, never taking any adventures, never trying anything for God's glory. I kind of like to set out and make attempts, go for it, try something.
Yeah, and that's the whole point of evangelism. And this plays in because if you think about it, the Bible tells us to go. And if we don't make those attempts, then we never will know how God will utilize us. We're given one simple task, and that is to go. Once we do that, we then see God move. We then see God work. And again, here you are, just an ordinary person with an extraordinary influence. And that is the beauty in and of itself. Now, I want to read the very last paragraph of the book. And I think this is what I call my golden nugget. And this is a beautiful piece. It says, "More realistic and more biblical It is to expect God to smack the world out of its lethargy by millions of ordinary, unknown, average believers who are sincerely pursuing the glory of Christ in their own day and generation. God grant us to be among their number. And
Yeah.
that little passage, and for me, Matt, I don't know what you thought of when you wrote it, but when I read that, I read it like 6 times last night when I got home, and I'm like sitting there and I kept reading it. I'm like, okay, this doesn't make sense. Okay, it does make sense. Okay, it doesn't make sense. Okay, wait a minute. Let's think about this. So when I read it those 6 times, it's like the end of a love letter, and it's saying that we're believers and we have to just pursue the glory of Christ in our own day. We're not living in the 1700 or the 17th century or the 3rd century. We're living in the 21st century, 22nd century, whatever you want to call it. And we're living in a world where things are looking more like sin is the key and the answer to everything. And every sin that is out there, it is perfectly okay. We're living in that time frame. So how can we be sincere in pursuing God and sincere in giving Christ all the glory? So.
Well, as you're reading that last paragraph, I was thinking to myself a little bit of a thought experiment. Would it be better to have one person that is known to a million and have that one person, speak to a million different souls? Or would it be better to have a million souls out there, each speaking to one person? And the more I think about that question, the more I think that God has chosen the second option, that he would rather have a million people who love him doing small things for his glory than to have one great famous Christian that's speaking to a million people. Obviously, we already have the one. The one is Christ. He is the one. He is the one to whom we all look in faith and repentance, confessing and believing in him. And so we don't need another, the one. We already have the one, and that the one is Christ. And so God, in his mercy and his eternal will and wisdom, it seems to me, would prefer to have a million little unnamed Christians out there affecting a million other lives than one great famous person who, could conceivably mess up and let everybody down. And I think that is another one of the dangers of fame, is that, the more known one person is, the more potential he has to hurt a great many people if his life falls apart or his doctrine goes rogue or, he does something of a sinister nature. And of course, we're all capable of that. And so it seems to me that the kingdom is actually stronger when it's based on the faithfulness and the obedience of that silent, anonymous million out there, rather than the one famous person that everybody looks to, pressuring that person and perhaps building them up more highly. So I guess that's my challenge. And, with that, I guess my work here is done on on this podcast. So I do want to say how much I've appreciated being on the show for the series, and I hope people would, of course, get the book so that they could consider these things more fully. But I look forward to our question and answer time, Brandon, in the next podcast, and I think that's going to be a wonderful opportunity to talk more about it.
Yes, and just to give my listening audience a little update on that, we will be live via Facebook, and we're still working out some kinks. We're going to have kinks, but we will be live, and that will be, if you haven't submitted a question, you will be allowed to. We're going to pick like 4 people that will submit a question during the live viewing for you to see it. And then the joy is, if you miss the live viewing, you get to go back and listen to the audio or go back and watch the actual video. And we are looking for participation. I am looking for churches to adopt this teaching series for the adult Sunday school classes. I'm looking for a small group to pick up this book and read it. I'm looking for a book club to actually read this book and discuss it. This is, for me, this has been one of the best sharp